Okay then, you crazy cats, you've waited long enough. We're now going to start creating a sequence. And as you can see here, drop media to create a sequence. So this is where your sequences are going to be. And this is the media. Well, it's quite simple then. You just grab a video and drag it in and create a sequence, don't you? Not quite. And there are a couple of reasons why. I've just dragged that in there. Let's just go to sequence and check sequence settings. So the sequence settings here, say it's 1920 by 1080. That's the output that we want to do. In all honesty, all of my videos on YouTube, bar just a couple, are all still 1920 by 1080 HD. There are some creators that are uploading in 4K. It's great that we can shoot in 4K. I still don't think we're there yet to deliver in 4K. However, if you dropped a 4K piece of footage in here and dropped it into here, it would have set the sequence to 4K. There's a reason why I don't do that, and there's a couple of things in here that I want to set from the get-go, which is why we don't just drag and drop. Also, labels or names the sequence the name of the actual file that we first drag in. And you can also see something else that's changed here. I'm just going to tilde, remember that? So we can see everything in here. I don't think this size, oh, this does size up a little bit so we can see. So on here you can see one icon which is different from the others. Now we'll take a quick look at these. This has two icons within the icon. There's a little film strip icon there, and there's a sound wave icon there. That means that it's a video file with audio. Nice and simple. What this means is it means it's a sequence. So as you can see, there's actually two names there, Pizza Oven 1 and Pizza Oven 1. But if we drag this out a little bit, it's Pizza Oven 1 MP4. So that's confirming this icon, that it's a video. This has nothing after it, which means it's a sequence, because that's what we built the sequence from. Just going to tilde it again to close this, or minimize it at least, bring down that size as well. And what we're going to do is we're going to undo Control and Z. And that was dragging that on. I'm going to Control and Z again to get rid of the sequence that it created, because there is another way to do this, and a better way, again, setting yourself up for success. And that is, we're going to come all the way out so we're in the root of the project, not within a folder or a bin. And what we're going to do is we're going to create another bin. There are a couple of ways to do this. You can, wherever you are in the project folder, you can go to File, New, and Bin, or you can see the shortcut Control and B. I've never used that. Or you can just right click in an empty space here and click New Bin. That's the way I do it, so that's the way I'm going to do it. And what it does is it opens up a new bin, it creates a new bin, and it already has the title there to edit. We're going to name this bin Sequences. We do that because depending on what bin you're in, when you create a sequence, it will place the sequence inside that bin. Let's just try that. I'm going to just go Control and N. It's going to get a little ahead and create a sequence. And it places the sequence in here. Now, you can't see where it is. And I promise you, sequences are the things you really need to be able to keep a track of. If you can't find your sequence, you've created it somewhere accidentally, you will do this, and you can't find it, the easiest way to find is to come all the way to the root of your project folder and click in the search bar and just simply type SEQ, and all the way through, regardless of how many bins you have here, remember bins are folders, regardless of how many bins you have here, it will show all of the sequences. The reason why we're also not just dragging into here is because I want to be able to label the sequence what it is. So let's Control and Z. Let's clear off that search first. Control and Z a number of times, and let's create that bin again. So right click, New Bin, and we're going to title this Sequences and hit Enter. I tap the Enter all the way over to the right of my keyboard where the number key is. If you're entering, if you've put your title in here, you've reworded, and you hit return, which is the one just above the right hand shift, it will go to the next item, whether it be a bin or a file, any kind of media, to retitle that as well. That's quite frustrating for me, and I don't know why that's still a case in Premiere Pro. If you do that, just click anywhere, either here or anywhere in Premiere Pro. Even if you've just titled it, if you click out, it will then just accent that and action it so it's done. Not accent, action it. So we now have two bins. We have a bin with our footage in, and we have an empty bin of sequences. You see how when we double click, it doesn't open and open and open, but you can twirl down these as well, so you can keep everything in view if you prefer. So with sequences created, the bin, we're going to double click into there. You see how that happens again? What we need to do is double click it when it's not been selected. And now we're in here, we're going to create a new sequence. There are a number of ways to do this. It's not a right click like you did with the new bin. You can either go to File, New, and Sequence, or what I always do, once I'm in the area, this area where I want to create the sequence, I type Control and N. That brings up this, which is the new sequence taskbar. And this is where we create our sequence for our timeline. Now, as you can see under here, I already have a number of custom sequences built. How did I do that? Well, it's quite simple. You only have to do this once for each type of sequence you want to create. As you can see, I already have 1080, 25 FPS. All the details are here for what that means. I have 4K YouTube YT. That is a 4K size, so it's 3840 by 2160, 25 frames a second still, and it's a progressive scan, 48,000 hertz for the audio. That's all absolutely fine. We don't really need to bother with that. 5:4 is not quite square, but it's a nice dimension for video on Instagram when you want it slightly taller than square. However, we do have square as well. We also have Ultra HD, which actually isn't Ultra HD. I made this wrong, and I always meant to delete that, so I'm actually gonna so I'll highlight it and I'm going to delete that preset, and then it refreshes. This will refresh again once we make our preset. And I also have vertical, which is, instead of 1920 by 1080, it's 1080 by 1920. So for vertical video stories in Facebook or Instagram. So how do we make this? It's really quite simple. What you need to do is go to any of these. We're gonna make it easy, and we're gonna go to digital SLR. Doesn't really matter. We're going to twirl down 1080, and we're going to select the 25 frames. Now this needs to be thought of if you're in an NTSC area. This is for PAL, so 25 frames a second is for PAL. 24 frames a second, we haven't mentioned that so far. 24 frames per second is considered more of a cinematic frame rate. I don't use it personally. And then we have 30 frames a second, which is effectively, remember this, 29.97 frames per second. It says it's 30, but it's not. It's 29.97 or 30 drop frame. This is the only real thing that you'll change depending on where you are. But again, it doesn't really matter that much anymore because of the world of the internet and everyone watching the same thing in different parts of the world. Again, this only really matters with the footage and where it was captured, whether it was captured at 50 hertz or 60 hertz, which will be clear in 25 frames a second or 29.97 or 30 frames a second, or multiplications of that. So whether it's 25, you go to 50, 50, you go to 100, with 30, you go 30 to 60, and 60 to 120 frames a second. Do you remember us covering that? I'm sure you do. If you don't, Chapter 5.1 was understanding frame rates, and Chapter 4.2 was PAL versus NTSC. If this has gone over your head a little bit the first time, maybe take a little trip back and just refresh your knowledge with regards to that. So we're going to make a preset of 25 frames per second, 1080. Now we've highlighted this. We're then going to go to settings. Now we want 1920 by 1080. That's absolutely fine. All of this is absolutely fine. What we want to do is we want to have maximum render quality. Now, this all depends on your machine, whether it's got 4 gigabytes or 8 gigabytes of RAM or 16 gigabytes. I have 64 gigabytes in my machine. That's not showing off. I'm a content creator and I run a media production business, so I need as much RAM as I can get. I'm actually considering upgrading to 128, but anyway, that's by the by. So the warning says setting the optimized rendering performance to memory is highly recommended when max quality or max bit depth rendering is on. These settings are designed for high performance systems, which I have. Please check Adobe Premiere Pro Support Center for recommended system requirements. It's a really good document, is the Pro Support Center, for sending you to sleep. However, it does have some good information. So if you're not quite sure with regards to your machine, and I could cover in here so many different eventualities, it's best you just doing the homework yourself and finding exactly what the best setting is for you for your machine. I'm going to click OK and leave that. However, my machine, I'm terrible. I love to see everything as perfect as possible. So you'll see in my workflow, I actually slow myself down because I want to be able to watch back properly. We'll deal with that. I will cover that when we get to there. Everything else is absolutely fine. We don't want to do this every single time. Just to check tracks. This is a default, so your sequence will automatically open with 3 video tracks and 3 audio tracks. That's fine. You can always add or delete. You can add additional tracks or remove. It doesn't really matter. That's easily done within the sequence. VR video, we are not working with VR video. It blows my mind. So all of this is done. We're going to save the preset so we don't have to do this again. And we're going to name this preset. As you saw, I have saved mine as 1080 something, 16:9. I'm not too sure. But I'm not going to say that. But you would put the name in that you want to save it, and then you'd press OK. When you press OK, what would happen is this would refresh, and you would have custom down here. I'm not quite sure if the custom is already there at the beginning, but it sure will be there once you create a preset, because it will be a custom preset. Also, once you open a sequence with one of these once, this will always be the default that it opens at. Don't run into the mistake that I've made a number of times, and I normally create in 1080 25 FPS, but there's the odd time where I create a square sequence. And then when I've come back into here, even if I've saved everything, closed out, started a brand new project and started a sequence, I haven't even looked here. I've just renamed and hit OK and realized, it's still on square. So this will remember the last sequence you made whenever that was, and it will already have it highlighted and selected. So make sure you select the one that you want, which is 1080 25 FPS. That's what I want to call this. And then we're going to name the sequence, because if we don't and we just press OK, in our sequences bin we'll just have sequence 02, not 01, because remember we already made a sequence before which we didn't use. I used it to illustrate, but we're going to highlight this and we're going to call this pizza oven. Now actually I'm going to call this pizza oven sequence for 2 reasons. One, we already have pizza oven 1, 2, 3, 4 and so on for the footage. Also, I want to highlight when we get to the end of all this what you do to render out and the name of the save file. Bear that in mind. It'll be a while until we get to there, but this will come into effect especially when we get to that point. Okay, in fact I'm going to say pizza oven sequence and I'm going to say 1080. So that's going to tell me that it's in 1080. I could say it's 16:9 for those of you who don't quite yet understand aspect ratio. 16:9. The old style TVs were 4:3, so it was 4 across and 3 down. It's just a ratio. The 1080 by 1920 by 1080, sorry, is 16:9. So that's 16 along to 9 down. It's the smallest fraction you can get. And it's what widescreen TV is now. You also have more and more different aspect ratios. One aspect ratio that you will know is 1:1, which is square. Obviously, it's 1 along by 1 down. That's square. That's the images and videos, particularly on Instagram. But then we have 4:5, so it should be 4 across by 5 down. So it's almost square, but a little bit taller. Anyway, we're going to save this sequence as Pizza Oven Sequence 1080 and press OK. Now, because we did Control and N in this bin, it's created this sequence in this bin. And as we can see, Pizza Oven Sequence 1080, and here is our sequence ready to work in. What are we going to do next? Well, yeah, it is that time. We're going to bring some footage into here, but via here.